Welcome to NEXTGames Intense Ambuscade series, March 2024 against Velkk. Now we haven't seen this run for 4 years now, and it can be one of the more time-consuming runs, especially for solo players. Fortunately, I've been able to come up with some strategies that have sped up the kills this time around by several minutes on each of the solo difficulties. Party kills can also be done by a variety of jobs this month, so we will discuss what those runs look like as well. Before we get into that though, let's talk about key item acquisition. This month, you will need 1 Velkk kill for your first run of the day, and 3 Velkk kills for multiple runs in that same day. The best place I find to quickly get these is to use Waypoint Warp to Bivec number 2 in Marjami Ravine, and know that if all of the Velkk there are also taken, you can also go to Bivec number 1 in Marjami Ravine to also get these key item kills. Now, on to the run itself. Now, which enemies you go up against this month will be determined by the difficulty you choose, so I'll first go over each of the enemies that we can see and what to expect from each of them, and then we can discuss how we deal with these enemies on each of the difficulties. First, the main NM is called the Bazzetto Regent, and he is a paladin. His attacks have an N-bind effect. Now in addition, he has access to the following abilities. Coming Through, which is a conal damage ability absorbed by 2 shadows. Merciless Mauling, a conal damage ability that is also absorbed by 2 shadows. Velkk Ambush is a single target damage ability that hits 4 times and can dispel a buff with each of those hits. Now this is absorbed by 4 shadows, so you want to keep shadows up at all times if possible to avoid your buffs from getting dispelled. Now Sovereign Edict grants a magic shield for 15 seconds and also resets enmity for all enemies and also activates their SP abilities. Galumph is an AoE ability that inflicts attack down and stun. Now the range of this is ability is small, so I recommend you keeping it away from your trust and they shouldn't get hit with this. Now Croctastrophe is a powerful AoE damaging ability that will hit everyone including your trust because its range is about 30 feet. This is the most dangerous ability you will encounter and it can often leave your trust at dangerously low hit point levels. Trust selection will be important to defend against this. Now the last ability is Noblesse Oblige, which will level up all the enemies and restore 15% of the main boss's health. This ability is triggered by the death of a servitor or the use of an attack or skill chain that does more than 25,000 damage. Now if you defeat one of the servitors, this threshold is increased to 40,000 damage. Now a key aspect to this fight will be making sure this ability goes off as few times as possible. Now on the higher difficulties, these level ups can be quite deadly as they will each boost the damage from Catastrophe and other attacks. The Regent will often have a magic shield up, making it so that all magic and skill chain damage is negated, so keep this in mind when planning your strategy. Now let's talk about the ads that you're going to see, the Bazzetto Servitors. There are up to 3 of these depending on the difficulty you choose. All of them are susceptible to important debuffs, such as Sleep, Slow, Paralyze, Silence, Bind, Gravity, etc. Each also have access to the abilities of Death Spin, which will knock you back and lower your defense by 25%, Gluttonous Dart, which is a single target damage ability that will bind you, and Velkk Pijmakia, which is a single target 4-hit ability that can dispel with each of those hits. First, let's talk about the Black Mage variant of these ads. He has access to Mana Font and Jungle Hoodoo, which is an AoE damage, bind, and slow ability. He will also spam lots of Gospels, and from what I read, has the ability to use Death, though I've not seen it. If you have the ability, I recommend silencing the Black Mage while you fight it with your party. Second, let's talk about the Paladin variant. He has access to Invincible and Saurian Slide, which is a conal ability that will remove your main and sub-weapons for several seconds, and cause you to re-equip them. Now, this is an annoying ability that you need to be on the lookout for, as it can really slow down your run if you don't notice that your weapons have been removed. Now the second ability that can be used by the Paladin is Jungle Wallop, which can hit for high amounts of AoE damage, as well as inflict Bind, Silence, and Amnesia. Now lastly, the Dark Knight is the third variant. He has access to Blood Weapon, as well as all those same abilities that the Paladin had, so you again need to be ready for your weapons to be removed, and for Amnesia to be inflicted if he uses that Jungle Wallop ability. So how do we deal with all of this on each of the difficulties this month? Well, let's go over them one by one and discuss that. First, the very easy difficulty, which I would only recommend for returning players with base level 119 gear. Here, you will be taking on only the Regent. I would focus on spamming the strongest weapon skill you have access to, since skill chains will often hit for 0 damage. Savage Blade spam should work good here if you have access to it. Next, the easy difficulty, which I recommend for most soloers this month and which you just saw me give an example of. Here you'll be taking on the Regent and a single Black Mage add. Here you will focus on the Black Mage first, taking him out as quickly as you can with however you can get your damage in. Skill chains and magic burst will still do good damage here. Now he's going to spam Gauss spells, and this mixed with the boss's shadow stripping abilities will often leave you without shadows for much of this initial part, so I often just leave them down in the interest of a faster kill on the Black Mage. Now once that Black Mage is dead, you will now focus on that Regent, the only one left. He will be a bit harder to kill on this difficulty than he was on very easy, and again I recommend Savage Blade spam, doing your best to not let your TP go too high so you don't go over that 40,000 damage threshold that will trigger if you have a single attack over that limit. Even if you do go above that limit though, I noticed in my own battle example that I did have a few instances where I went over that number, but I only saw a single level up during my run. So while you should be careful with your damage in a single attack, I have not seen it pose any issues yet in my test on this easy difficulty. Now if you can get your damage in quickly with Savage Blade spam, you can often get a win, as you see me doing here, in about 5 minutes. Now if you don't have access to Savage Blade spam, you can always just go with your strongest weapon skill, but in my test with using things like Blade Shun and Blade 10, kills were taking in the 8 to 10 minute range, so it will dramatically slow your fight down. Now let's move on to the normal difficulty, which you see me taking on right now. Now I had done this back in 2020, and the wins were taking me near 30 minutes, which made this really not worth it. But this time around, I was able to get my kill time down to about 20 minutes. Now while I still don't think that's really worth it compared to the 5-minute kills that you can achieve on easy, I figured I'd at least show how these runs differ for those that want to attempt this, and to give party players some experience with the other adds that you're going to see. That's because on this difficulty, you're actually going to be going against the Paladin and Dark Knight adds instead of the Black Mage, so you will need to be on the lookout for those weapon stripping abilities, and you may have periods of time when your run is slowed by amnesia. I also find that the higher defense of the enemies on this difficulty makes Savage Blade spam not nearly as effective, and my Blade Shun spam ended up surpassing it dramatically. Note, you still won't get in any skill chain damage most of the time, but a few of them will slip through when the shield is down for those brief moments. Now I tried to get some magic burst damage in during those windows as well, but was largely unsuccessful on this difficulty doing so. Therefore, I recommend just sticking with Blade Shun spam, creating light skill chains or whatever you find your greatest and strongest weapon skill to be. Now the beginning of the fight will be the hardest when you have all 3 mobs on you. If possible, sleep or bind the mobs that you aren't fighting, but I found it wasn't entirely necessary. Be sure to always try to keep the enemies facing away from your trust and as far away from them as possible. Some abilities with larger range will still hit them, but this will largely keep them safe. Now your shadows will get stripped very quickly, but keep recasting them for hate control that it provides. Now keep in mind that the servitors do take skill chain damage and magic damage, so take advantage of that as you can. Once you have just the Regent left, be sure to continue to keep him at max distance from your trust, and enfeeble him as much as you can to make your life easier and limit his TP abilities. Catastrophe is still the only real risk I saw with this strategy, and if it goes off and hits your trust, you will want to pull back a bit from them to give your trust time to cure before they rejoin the fight. Next, let's talk about the difficult and very difficult difficulties. Here, you'll be taking on all 3 servitors in the same fight. You'll normally want a solid tank, 2 damage dealers, and a bard, red mage, and healer. Now the tank is going to pull all the Velkk to a corner, while the red mage uses bind on the Regent and sleep on the Paladin and the Dark Knight. Then, after the Black Mage is silenced, all damage is focused on that Black Mage until it's dead. The red mage then keeps the other 2 servitors sleeping, while the focus is on taking out the main NM, being sure not to go above that 40k damage threshold in a single attack. This means you don't want to skill chain, as those skill chains can often spike above that range, so it's recommended to spam Savage Blade, which can't skill chain with itself, and to use Savage Blade at lower TP levels to be sure not to go above that 40,000 point threshold. Now once the Regent is dead, you can then easily take out the Dark Knight and then lastly the Paladin to complete your run. That's going to be all I have to share for this month's run. I hope you found that helpful. Go ahead and enjoy the rest of the normal difficulty battle example, and we'll see you next month. Take care, everyone.